Oh, okay. So hello everyone. I'm about to start. I always like to ask if you can hear me. Just one of my nightmares is that I'm speaking all the time and there's no sound or something. That actually happens when I'm making the can videos. Actually, it has happened to me. So great. Okay. So thanks for answering in the chat. Yes. So it looks like the audio is okay. So I'm going to be showing you a game between Honinbo Shuwa and Murase Shuho. So just to introduce Honinbo Shuwa to start with, Shuwa was he was the strongest player of his time because of some kind of social and political stuff. Plus one unfortunate win to a inferior player. He didn't actually get the chance to become the Meiji, which is the recognized strongest player. But I would say he was the strongest player of his time. And Shuho was sort of the next in line. So he was one of the junior students in the Honinbo, the house, or the Iamoto, you might call it. So kind of a clan-like thing. Hello, Spencer. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all the comments. So Shuho was sort of expected to be the next Honinbo. And there's a thing with names here. So I'll start with that. Murase was his original family name, and I think yes, he was actually at the time calling himself Murase Yakichi, which is I think it was his original name. And they start calling you a Hoinbo when they've decided to you're going to be the next leader of the house or the Iamoto. So it's something that happens when you're more advanced in your career. So he's actually not Shuho yet either, because that would be a name he adopted when he became the Hoinbo. So the name is not actually completely correct, but Shuho is the name that everyone remembers him by. And so, like, if I called him Murase Yakichi, probably no one would know who. Well, there would be a lot of people who didn't know who that was. But he eventually became Honinbo Shuho, and I sort of compromised here by leaving his family name in, and that's something that is done also. It was Murase Shuho. And then Go players tend to know who he was. So back to the beginning of the game. That's enough background, I think. there's a story to this guy, actually. I can go into that later in the game. So the order of moves here is different from what we... Oh, yes. Well, Chris Davis is saying he might have been Hayashi Shuho. There was a point in time when he became the leader of the Hayashi house. So that's where the Hayashi comes in. At the time of this game, it's not yet. So, you've got me started on that. So actually, Shuho was kicked out of the Honinbo house because one of the senior family members, it was Joa's widow. Joa was the Honinbo before Shuwa, so he was very senior. His widow did not like Shuho. And she had a favorite who was Shue, who actually became the Hoinbo. And he was the son of Shuwa. So he was kind of a family member. And so Shue became the Hoinbo before Shuho. And then at a later time, he actually invited Shuho back. And Shuho became the Hoinbo after Shue and promptly died a few months after that. And so Shue became the Hoinbo again. So Shue was Hoinbo before and after Shuho. So it's sort of complicated there. He started a separate company and started promoting Go on his own. So there was a kind of a feud there between Shuho and the Hoinbo family, or the traditional Iamoto system as a whole, for a certain period of time, and then there was they made up eventually. So as I was saying, the order of moves here is sort of strange, but this Murase, yes, that's Clayton asking how I pronounce Murase. It's Murase, so that's 3 syllables. So this opening is something that we could play nowadays. So just to go back to the beginning of the game, after these first two moves, it's perfectly conceivable that black would play here and white would play here. And this is a corner enclosure that we still play now. When white plays an approach move, nowadays people usually either play the diagonal move, or I'm talking about top professionals, that is. They usually play the diagonal move or the knight's move. And so this is perfectly conceivable. Although I would probably be playing high here. The AIs like to play on the fourth line with this move. But this is not out of the question. And then here. So up to this point, it's an opening that we could be seeing nowadays. So that's something that I found interesting about this game, where it sort of links up to the board position, where they, just to show you the game order again, it was a completely different order of moves. But it has the same result at this point. Okay, so at this point, I think again, we would probably be seeing something like this or something like this in a modern game. After the AIs came, it just, every time that black presses here, which is not the game move, those of you who were here from the beginning of the program here probably saw where black actually played. I'll show you that later. But this is a move that is given a high score almost all of the time by AIs, or computer programs that are good at playing Go. And maybe something like, oh yeah, I had the variation already. So like this would be expected. And this is supposed to be good for black. By the way, this game is a no combing game, so it's good. It's good for black anyway. But disregarding that, this is supposed to be a good variation for black nowadays. This is actually something that could have happened in the Edo era at the time of this game. This would have been a popular way for black to play. But Murase was Shuho was a flashy player in a way. He liked to play exciting games. He liked to do things that were slightly different. There are some games of his where he makes a big moyo in the center of the board, which was not done very much at the time. And so he experiments. So this is an example of him playing a more dangerous move as black, when at the time people, because there was no komi, people playing with black tended to play a bit conservatively in the open. But he's not doing that with this move here. He's inviting white to start a fight. Now Shuwa was a player who quite often liked to play a strategy that's called amashi. And this strategy is basically it's playing to take territory, not very actively, fairly passively in the opening, taking territory, allowing the opponent to have the initiative, but hopefully will be ending up with a lead in territory and just handling a lot of weak stones on the way. So that was a strategy that he played with black. And with black, he would just run away with a lead in territory and handle his weak group, and that would be the end of the game. He was very successful. With white, it's sort of difficult for white to run away with a lead in territory when there's no komi. But Shuwa would balance the territory, and he would skillfully handle his weak groups, and it would become a close game. So that was his strategy in this game, actually. So the reason I'm saying this now is that my move would probably be to attach here, and if black plays here, this would lead potentially to a fight. It's a common variation of the taisha joseki, which is the taisha. We call it the taisha when black plays the large knight's move here against white's 3-4 point. But it's a taisha even though white has a pincer on the side. So this pincer, it's going to change the joseki a little bit, but we still call it the taisha. And black would probably cut here. And again, now that we have computer programs, there's been some changes. So if you That's a good question, Tan Findies. Findies? I'll get back to it after I finished talking about the lower left corner. But this is the traditional Joseki, which is, um, as I was saying, there are some changes made by AIs, and I'm not going to get into them now, but this is still pretty valid, but it's not what the AI would have you play. So it's something that's changed. This is a variation which is going to lead to a fight in the center of the board, and this is what happened a lot at the time of the game. It was this kind of the default variation here. But it's not the way Shuwa likes to play. He doesn't like to get into a big, dangerous fight in the center of the board. He prefers to take territory. So that's what he's trying to do with this move. And the move that I would expect for black to play is this one. And we get into this Joseki, where white crawls a bit. And the Joseki move is for white to jump here. And in this game, white would just leave that and play here. By the way, with the Master series of games where AlphaGo came onto the internet and played 60 games against the top professionals of the world, like there was no one below, I think it was the top 30 players in the world that challenged Master or AlphaGo in that series of games. And it had a perfect record, of course. This Joseki in the lower left corner is something that it would play. And when the human player curled once more in an attempt to take Sente, then AlphaGo would play away. The position on the lower side here is different, but it's a kind of a similar idea here. So there was a question about that extension that white played on the right side. I think I've lost it. I said your name once, but here. Now, if we assume that black has played here, I was saying that my next move would be to play here. Basically, it's sort of interest. Oh, sorry. It's sort of interesting that. Oh, something's happening with my mouse here. Okay, it's sort of interesting that you're questioning this move, because a modern Go player or an AI, all of us will question the fact that white has left an invasion here. At the time, white was trying to invite black into a complicated fight because of the fact that there's no komi. So that's part of it. Nowadays, computer programs don't even like the three-space extension, which was played a lot in the 20th century, into the 21st century, I guess, until we started using AIs. This is not liked by AIs either because of the invasion. And so it prefers either the two-space if white's going to play on this third line, and a three-space high extension if white's going to play on the fourth line. And this is the move that I would recommend to you as a Go player. But it's just not what Shuwa was trying to do. At the time with white would be inviting black to start a fight in the beginning of the game, just because playing a very bland game with no komi is it's difficult for white to win the game. So that's my answer to that question. I'm getting a lot of that was Tom Findies, Findies, I guess, yes, asking that question. Iki Ching is asking, were players of the era unaware that black had an advantage to the playing first, or did they know but did not think adding komi yet? It's a good question. They did have some special games where they added komi as kind of to add to the entertainment. So it was kind of it wasn't a serious thing that they were doing with the komi at the time. They did it sometimes with Rengo, or games where they had a team playing a game. So the team games with about 3 players on each side taking turns to play. It's something we still do sometimes. And sometimes they used komi in those games. The focus in this era was on the Dan system, where they had where there was actually a big difference between the ranks. So, for instance, a Shodan, a 1 Dan professional, and a 8 Dan professional, that 8 rank difference actually translated into a handicap. So that would be 2 or 3 stones, I think. I think it was about 3 ranks for each stone. So something like that. So they had a handicap system, and they had a big field, a difference in strength among the professional players. So it would be common that the top player of the period, like Honinbo Shuwa, would be giving 2 stones to some of his students who were already called professional players. So, for instance, this game between Honinbo Shuwa who was, I think he was Jun Meijin, which makes him an 8 dan, or equivalent. They only had up to 7 dans. And then they would call you Jun Meijin if you were above 7 dan. So that's one rank above 7 dan. They didn't actually call him an 8 dan. And then if you were Meijin, or the strongest player, the recognized strongest player, there's only one of those at each in each era, then you would be a 9 dan, basically. You would be 2 ranks above the 7 dan. And a 9 dan and a 7 dan playing, the 7 dan would take black. And so this game between Murase Shuho and Shuwa, actually, I think it's Sen Ni, probably. So it's Sen or 2 stones, black or 2 stones. So yeah, I think 2 ranks actually was the difference, if I recall correctly. And so they knew that there was a difference, but there was actually a difference. They maintained the idea that there was a difference in strength also. And I think it was a bit tough on the higher ranked player, but they were playing handicap games among the other professionals. Okay, it's good. Dialectics Junkie has added his comment that works. Yes, they were aware of the imbalance of Komi, but they tried to offset that. But yeah, so like in 10-game matches, which were usually pretty important sometimes. Sometimes there were challenging matches that were important. Sometimes they were more friendly than that. The matches would be decided by the difference in ranks, but by the fact they played a lot of games. If the players are the same rank, of course, they had Komi, but they alternate between black and white, so it works away. Right, exactly. So that's what. Oh yes, very good. But if there was a difference in ranks, they would play. If it was Sen I Sen, which is the 1 rank difference, where the lower rank player has black in 2 out of 3 games, then they would have to play some multiple of 3, so it would be 6 games or something. And 4 of those games would be the lower ranked player playing with black, and 2 of them would be the higher ranked player playing with black. This is something they were doing into the 20th century. Right, yeah, Shuwa did like to mix up the opening. Okay, I think I've caught up. So here, like I was saying, Shuwa's idea is that he's going to take territory. And this is a difficult style to play, but it does give you kind of speed in taking territory. So that was a style that Shuwa really liked to play. And of course, Shuho knows that. So he's going to change the story here. And he's going to play an unusual joseki where he goes down here. This is a move that is called a joseki. It's a valid move. Although the computer programs, my AI Katago was expecting black to play here. Actually, although this would be the normal joseki, Katago was showing me a variation where white cut. And this was completely different. Sort of interesting, where black sacrifices 3 stones. And probably is going to end up playing here anyway. And this seems to be apparently fairly even. So this is not something that I would have expected, but it's sort of an interesting variation. But Shuho just, he's not going to give so much territory to white. He's trying to play a more balanced game here, where he doesn't fall behind in territory. So that's what he's doing when he's moving to the left side of the board here and taking the territory. They did not have time controls. That's Leonardo de Wagner. But when they were playing relatively informal games, this was a game within the Honinbo family clan, you might say, the Honinbo house. So they probably just played it. I don't really know the details. The date given was just the 12th of May. So they could have played it in one day or one afternoon. Shuwa was known to be a fairly fast player. So he could play games fairly quickly. And this was a casual game. It wasn't, the honor of the Honinbo clan was not was not counting on it. It was a relatively private game between two members of the same Iamoto, the same house. So they didn't have to spend so much time on it. There were more important games that could last longer. It was actually with Honinbo Shuwa, who came in the 20th century, where it really got extended. Most of the games were not quite that extended. They could take, they could adjourn the game, and then they would start again at some later date, and that's how the games in Edo era took a long time sometimes. Sometimes they never finished them. Okay, so white plays here. This is a reasonable move. It's a move that we would play at the time. I mean, nowadays you see AIs playing moves like this, and it's really difficult to explain how this is supposed to work. So I'm just to show you. I don't really advise you try this move all the time, but I did make a video about it. So yeah, you can look it up in my channel. So black invades. Finally, black invades. You can see how Shuho is fairly carefully setting this up, because he started by playing all of the sides. So he finishes the sides and then he starts the fight. This is a kind of an ordered sequence that was very popular in this era. Like nowadays, you see people starting the fights all at once. So a fight would start, say in this game, it might have started in the lower left corner, and it would just spread out to the whole board. So that's how we do it now. It's part of it is the fact that the time controls are shorter and the games are getting a bit more active, or you might even say violent. And it's also the fact that our AIs seem to like these challenging moves. And so top players are picking up on that and playing more actively in the beginning of the game. At the time of this game, or the whole period, so the Edo era was about 300, a bit more than 300 years, I think, from the 1600s to the 1800s. And during this era, Go flourished in Japan, and they developed this style of just having stones sort of scattered around the board to sort of control the sides, and then they would start the first fight. So this is the way they like to do it. And it works for black when there's no komi, because black can take his time and doesn't have to hurry to start the fight. So here we come to a position which is sort of educational, because this is a move that white plays a lot. Another way for white to try to protect that group would be to play here. This is perfectly okay, but it's a bit slower. So white's trying to be a bit more active with this move. And if black plays here, white's going to curl around here. You can see how by attaching against black's corner enclosure, white's getting a little clump of stones there, which is building a two stone pillar here. The 2-stone pillar is making the 3-space extension. I'm talking about these 3 spaces here. It's making it viable. It's making it work for white, because white has a 2-stone pillar there. So for instance, if white had simply played a 3-space extension like this, it would have been bad because there would be no protection against this invasion. But by doing it this way, and making this exchange here, white gets the 2-stone pillar there, which enables white to handle invasion like this. So white has a way to handle an invasion there. So black would play here. This is actually a variation that's my example for you of what black should not do. Because when black goes down to the second line here, there's a weakness in the corner when white can take away the corner territory like this. So that peep there is really very cruel to black. It's a tough move, which black doesn't want white to allow white to do. It's taking away the corner territory, and in some cases black would even have to worry about the eye space of that corner group. So this is a move that white is looking to play, and the educational thing about this game is that black avoids that by playing this move. This is a move that is worth remembering, because black is getting rid of the weakness from this side, closing white off from that side. At the same time, if black had played away, for instance, if black had played away, this move is actually a move that can sometimes be played locally, but white's going to get this honey here. And this also takes away a lot of the corner territory and black's eye space. So this would start a fight with black playing something on the upper side, but I don't really advise giving away the corner like that. So this move is a move that I wanted to talk about a little bit here. Yes. Well, yes. Safari Atari is saying 016, the attachment next to black's corner, and the attachment here is a move that Shinjin-so likes to play. Shinjin-so is very versed in computer programs moves. Like he knows them to a great deal, very detailed. So you can watch his games, and quite often he's playing a move that is pretty much the computer variation. Okay, so the second point I wanted to make, this game, there's a lot of great ideas in this game. So that's one of the reasons I chose it today. This point, white is pushing here. You might expect black to extend. But before extending, it's very important for black to play the peep here. And I wanted to go into detail about why it's important to play the peep here. So I'm going to give you an example of black playing the peep later. So black extends here. When black gets out into the center here, obviously this is an important point. It's the head of two stones. So if black is just going to play somewhere else, white's going to play here and is going to be able to enclose black's corner. So that's something that black wants to avoid. So that's how the move itself is working. But if black plays there immediately, if black plays there immediately and white extends, and then say black wants to play this peep after all, now white's going to sacrifice the two stones. So something like this, black needs one more move to capture the two stones. It's still a ladder, so white has a potential ladder breaking move, or white can move out on the right side. The way that black is taking these two stones is a bit clumsy. You can see that this move here, this stone here, is wasted. It's not participating really. Although it makes the ladder, you really wish that you had been able to capture those two stones. So that's how peeping later is not working. So what happens if black peeps first? Let's say again, now if white plays here, the same variation I was showing you just now. In this case, black's going to get rid of that wasted move. So black plays the target immediately, and if white extends on the upper side, this time black's going to get to capture the two stones. So this is something like 100% better. I would give 2 or 3 points komi to be able to do it this way. It's a huge difference. It's going to make a big difference about what happens to this black stone too. So it's really important. On the other hand, if white tries to escape, black could even escape the 3 stones and start a fight there, or black could switch to the upper side. This is going to be really strong attack against white also. So you can see black has sort of gained the move here. It's much more active to peep first, and it's an important order of moves. This is a position, if you play the one space corner encloser, that's these 2 stones here, and if white attaches against it, there's a good chance you'll get into a similar position here. And it's always important to peep when you have a chance, as soon as possible. So the timing of this peep was fairly important, and so this happened. So that said, what exactly is black trying to do with this peep? That's the second question. So what did black accomplish here? You might remember that I was having white attach underneath instead of connecting later. So when black has played this exchange of these 2 stones, there is a very important positive change for black on the right side. It means, for instance, locally, black can play here at some point, and he did not. He did not throughout the game, but this is one of the threats that is going to change how the game progresses. So this is an example of one thing that black could have done. And if white plays here, kind of a forced sequence here, where white is being split into 2 groups. So this would evolve into a huge fight. And he just chose not to do that right now. White might be able to get away with this move, or maybe white would push here. And it would just be this huge fight towards the center of the board. Probably the with no komi, black wants to avoid that in this particular board position. But it's one of the threats that he has. So it's a real threat. And without that exchange, let's mark the exchange once more. Without this marked exchange here, that threat would not happen because white would not connect later in the game. Okay, back to the game here. So black jumps here. So this is a big move. This is one big move. Another big move, for instance, would be... Oh, no, he's not going to do that. Another big move would be kicking in the corner. That would stop white from attaching at the 3-3 point. That would be a big move. The upper side, for the time being, it's cooled down just a little bit. So the upper side of the board is probably not so important, momentarily at least. The right side here, with the kick here, is one move black could play. Another move that could be locally played here is the jump. And this is usually not so good, but as I was saying, black is looking at an attack on the right side. In this case, black would probably have a follow-up here, as I was showing, or even here. So black has something to look at on the right side. So in this case, jumping here is viable. Usually, black would not play that because it would give white the opportunity to live in the corner. But with that threat on the right side, this is another way black could play. So these two moves towards the lower right area are moves that black could have played. But instead, he played here. Now this is a huge move. And so without that move, this would be developing into probably a white territory. So that's big. And white played away. This is typical Shuwa. Again, he's trying to, with white, of course, he's going to have trouble getting a lead in territory, but he's trying to keep the territory close. So this is a territorial move. It's also, it sort of complicates the game by not going in a straight line. So, and it's putting a bit of pressure on these black stones. So it's trying to put pressure on black. It's a more active move. The normal way of playing, that said, I'm not necessarily saying this is going to be, which is better. The normal way of playing would be to push through here and continue like this. And probably in this case to cut in the corner. So this would capture the corner territory, something like this. Black can connect at G2, or in this case, black would probably, since the right side is important too, black could play away. And as I was saying, this jumping here is going to be a double threat towards white's right side area. And also, if white answers on this side, black is going to capture the lower right area. So black might just switch to this area. And if white captures here, then black would probably play something towards the side. You can see in this case, black is establishing that territory in the lower right area. So that would be the plan for black in this case. But Shuwa didn't do that. This would be a relatively straightforward way of playing. With white and with no komi, he likes to keep it more complicated. So that's what this move is doing. And black kicks. That's a very natural move there. And now white plays here. So again, the normal move would be this variation where white covers black. And it works to a certain degree. You can see that this stone here, now this stone is functioning as a pincer. And so it's not in a bad place. So it's a way white could have played. But he's playing something unusual. One of the characteristics of Shuwa's game was that he wasn't really stuck in a rut. He didn't play the same moves every time. Every game he played, he could play around with the opening. He was very innovative and different, and he could make all sorts of moves work to a certain degree. And so that's what I find exciting about Shuwa's games. He plays moves like I've not seen this move that white has just played in a great deal of games. Like I'm saying, probably objectively this is the optimal move. It's the move that AI suggests. But it's interesting. He's just playing a different shape to see how his opponent reacts. Playing around with various ideas here. So black pushes out. That's natural. Not exactly the AI variation, but it's pretty close, actually. Here, I don't really know why black didn't play here. There is a slight difference when white plays moves like this. And this is not going to work very well yet, but in some cases, there's some weakness towards the second line there, which maybe he wanted to avoid when he played here. So black played the third line jump, and white peeped once and pushed through here. And here, again, he's not playing the computer variation. Katago wanted to cut here and capture the two stones. And black would probably continue here. Taking territory like this, it works really well for computer programs like Katago. And it works relatively well when white has the komi to rely on. I think that that's part of the decision here not to play this way, because it sort of simplifies the game, just taking the prophet like that in the corner. This is the more complicated approach. And so the idea of having no komi, it really changes the way they play the game. That's what makes no komi games very interesting to me. They play differently because of the fact that they know that there's an advantage for black. Tom Findes is asking, you talked of black trying to avoid larger fights with there being a stone's difference between the two. And it's probably not a difference between reading abilities, as you suggest, but the other suggestion is it's more about komi. And it's about the style of the time, as I was saying about the opening here. Like, they like to take the big opening points and then progress into the middle game. And this separation of the opening and the middle game is something that lasted until we started researching with AIs. And it's sort of going away now because the fights start in the middle of the opening. And because this was so popular in the Edo era, 3 centuries in, you might call it the golden era of Go in Japan, that style, it stayed with us very prominently in Japan, and maybe not so prominently in Korea and China, where they did tend to fight a little bit more than the Japanese. This idea of playing the big opening points, it was more persistent, I think, in the Japanese Go community, because of the brilliance of these players in the Edo era. It was just a golden era of Go, and was the first real professional system where they could play Go 100% of the time. Okay, so this was a big move. White has 2 weak groups here. So there's this group on the left, which is 1 move away from living in the corner. And there's this group on the lower side, which is probably 1 move away from living on the side. So white has 2 relatively weak groups, and black has this 1 group which is not alive in between them. So that's the focus of this fight here. That means that while white played from this side in the game, the other way white could have done it was play this way, and black would jump here, putting pressure on that white group in the corner. Although I say that white can live with 1 more move in the corner, it's going to be a bit painful. It's not going to increase the white territory. So white wants to avoid having to live in the corner here. So they're interchangeable points. They're mian. The double hane here, kind of a shape move. Black could have extended. This would have been a solid way of playing that sort of makes, almost establishes an eye here. So that's an eye that black can make with sente. So it's a solid way of playing. But this is a shape move. And the important move here is, hi, that chess guy. Yes. The important move here is when white cuts. Because there's a tendency for weaker players to want to save that 1 stone. It's not the best move. It's always good to play an Atari on, well, it's usually good. I shouldn't say always, but it's usually good to squeeze like this, as in the game. And so what happens if black connects? This exchange of this stone and this stone is going to limit how black can continue. So for the time being, white has to extend on this side. And probably sliding here, this would establish a living shape for this white group. But white gets to peep from the center. You can see in this case, this is where this exchange is working to increase the number of forcing moves that white gets. So white can peep from the center like this. In this case, white's group in the lower left corner is settled. White's group on the lower side is settled. And white's ready to switch to the idea of enlarging the upper side. So white would continue with something like this. Black's slide is a big move. Black doesn't want to allow white to cover at c14. If white covers earlier, this would be okay because black would get to cut here. That cut is pretty important. So that's why white connected here, making miai of this, and move somewhere around here. And white has this nice, it's a nice territory that's developing from the upper side towards the center of the board. Relatively close. I'd say that with no komi, it's probably still good for black. But white's doing fairly well in this case. This exchange of the cut for black's connection, it did give white an extra forcing move towards the center of the board, so that was important. So it's the safe move for black to play an Atari instead. And squeeze, and in the game white connected and black extended. So with the benefit of having studied with AIs a bit and sort of getting used to the kind of variations that I get showed by, for instance, katago, this connection that white played here sort of jumped out at me. And I was sort of like saying, what? And it's not active enough. So I researched this with katago, and indeed katago is suggesting variations where white does not connect there. And it's just that the connection was a bit too slow. White probably has to play here, and it stands to lose points locally. But white can probably get away with a co-threat in the corner, maybe this one, threatening the attachment at p3. And if white can force black to connect once, then after that, the whole group there is relatively light. And white doesn't mind that some of those stones are going to be captured after all. And so this is just a way that is sort of alien to the way we used to play Go. But it's something that the AIs have shown us. And it's probably working fairly well. It's an interesting way of playing, which is probably better than what white did in the game. But we have to remember, Shua's style is that he allows his opponent to take the initiative, meanwhile taking some extra territory, and he handles all his weak stones and pulls ahead in territory, or tries to balance the territory. So this isn't really Shua's style. It would be more like if Shuho had white, maybe he'd try something like this. So back to the game. White connected. And with this, white is alive on the side. It's a kind of a complicated, it's a little life and death problem there, but it's alive. Just believe me. So white peeps here. So there are a lot of examples in this game where I feel very, very strongly that Shuwa is being slightly unreasonable. And I think it's because of the fact that there's no komi. And so he's trying just to get a slight bit extra. So for instance, in this case, I'd say the reasonable move is not to peep here, but to play something like this, reinforcing white's right side, reducing the scale of black's potential area there in the lower right. And after this, for the time being, that area is finished, and white can start doing stuff on the other side of the board. The upper side is pretty important. So if white plays here, white does have some potential in that area on the upper side. Yeah, just trust me when I say it's alive, Patrick. We're actually going to get into some variations later when black actually plays a forcing sequence there. So there will be a little bit of explanation. When white peeps here, white's just trying to get this exchange here, and then white would probably continue with this anyway. And so there's just a little extra value there with that peep in the connection. Later on in the game, or even immediately, if white continues with something like this and then bumps against here, you can see that it's like if black pulls back, it's working to an extent. If white did not have that exchange, let's see, it must be this variation. Yeah, if white did not have that exchange, then this doesn't work so well because black's going to be able to immediately capture it. And it's just better to have this exchange in so white can use, then white would be able to use it twice, sort of. So white would be able to get these forcing moves as well as the forcing move on the second line there. So it's just some extra mileage that white's getting out of these stones when white sacrifices them. So that was the idea behind white's peep there. And black's not listening to it. So black plays an attachment here and then plays this move. So this move is a kind of a in-between move. Not the strongest move. I would be tempted to play here. And Katago says white would probably jump in here. And you can see this is going to complicate things with black's territory. Black's potential territory on the right side is liable to disappear. So it could be dangerous for black. I tend to get into the dangerous variations. The invasion on the upper side. Leonardo the Wagner is asking about the invasion on the upper side. For the time being, white was really busy on the lower side of the board. So this variation actually that I was showing you where white plays here was white's first opportunity to sort of finish that up on the lower side and switch back to the upper side. So this is where white would continue, not that way, but I can't believe I don't have that variation. But for instance, a variation is something like this. This would be white's opportunity to switch to the upper side. This was probably the better move. Katago thinks that black still has a few points of the lead. So it's with no komi, maybe this is still good for black. I think it was, on the whole, it was probably a very well-played game by Shuho, actually. So it's Shuwa is having trouble catching up here. So white cuts and black plays here. So black is playing very tightly on the right side. They're training Shuho, yes. So he's trying to mix things up. Partly, it could be partly a lesson. So because they're the same school, he's trying to test Shuho's strength, maybe. But actually, I think Shuho already knows that Shuho is a very promising player. Shuho is kind of a favorite, I think, of Shuwa's. Shuwa wanted him to be the successor of the Honinbo house. But as I was saying earlier, Joa's widow, she didn't like Shuho as much as she liked Honinbo Shuwa. So, but I think Shuwa actually liked his game and thought he was a good player. And Shuho's games when he was a young player, they looked so much more promising than Shuei's games. Shuei's games looked a bit bland. He didn't look like he was going to be one of the top players. But he changed later in life, and now he's called one of the strongest players in history. So that, well, I'm digressing. Shuei is a different person. Okay, so white plays the attachment here, and white's just trying to play some forcing moves against the R11. Okay. Okay, Chris Davis is asking if there's a direct connection to what's happening now and this peep. I think that the fact that white mixed things up here in the local fight, the peep there is not functioning so directly towards what's happening here. But in some cases, we're going to see that black is still looking to push through here on the third line. So in some cases, it's going to be a part of the equation after all. Yes. So I think that in the variation I showed for white playing here, I mean, not that one, this one, and reinforcing the right side, This is a way for white to get rid of some of the threats caused by this peak. So this would be the way I suggest white should play in this variation, and it would be handling the threat given by that black peak. But he didn't do that, and he started a fight instead. Okay, to the game. So black played here and is making a territory on the right side. White's trying to chisel it down. And it would be a bad idea here for black to cover here and allow white to play these forcing moves. So that would be a bit too passive. Instead, black bumps against white. And the really important move, again, black doesn't cover here. Black doesn't cover here, but black plays here. And the beauty of this move is that by playing here, not only is black reinforcing himself on the left here, he's increasing the value of the center. So it's sort of surprising at first that black has not done anything to protect the right side territory. It was black spent so many moves creating that territory, but now he's just abandoning it. But the fact is, if white takes away the territory with something like this, black can just build on the center, and the center is pretty big. That's more than 20 points that black is going to get in that immediate area. And this would really simplify the game and make it relatively easy for black. Right. Rab Beverly, that's a good point. The players did know each other, and so they had an idea of their styles, and they're playing against each other's styles in a way that I find very interesting. So I agree with that. By increasing the value of the center of the board there, black is taking away white's opportunity to play on the right side, and actually white continues with this variation, where white is escaping in the center, continuing the fight here. This means that black gets an opportunity to surround the right side, and you might note that in the process, white didn't get to play the cut there, so black got rid of that. So black is keeping a lead in territory and is starting to focus on the fact that there's a potential attack here. And the time has not come. And a thing about the way that Shuho is attacking in this game is that there's a whole bunch of threats that never appear on the board. And so that's what makes it really interesting for me. There's a lot of threats in his game, and he doesn't actually use them. He doesn't use them directly. They don't show in the actual game, the moves of the game, but they're limiting what white can do. And so I'm going to show you a lot of variations towards the end of the game where white has things that he wishes he can do, but because of Shuho's threats, the hidden threats are stopping white from playing as he wants to. So white is trying to put pressure on black's rook on the lower side here, and you can see that black has a potential eye. So if black can make an eye with Sente on the side there by playing this sequence. So if we assume that white answers it, something like that, black would have one eye. Black doesn't really want to do that. Actually, locally, the move that black is thinking of playing at some time would probably be the double Hane here. And this happens towards the end of the game, actually. Otherwise, if black plays the solid connection, it's the same thing. Black only has one eye here. So black can make one eye with Sente, and the way white takes it away, and of course it sort of depends on various things happening on the adjacent sides. Sometimes white would want to play here to make an eye in the corner while taking away black's eye. Sometimes white would want to do it from this side to reinforce the right side group. So it sort of depends. But instead black plays here. Now this move, I should back up. I should back up to say that actually white had the opportunity to play here, and this would actually cut black somewhere. By the way, if white cuts immediately, I hope everyone notices that this is a net. So yeah, so this way. So this is a net. It doesn't work yet. But white can play here, and black plays on the right, and this is a double threat with a cut in the center and a cut below. So there's two cuts that white has. Black will probably play here and here. And this is a kind of a double purpose move that gets rid of the cut here. And when white cuts here, black gets to... So it's a more strong way to defend against the cut. In this variation, black gets to surround white's group in the lower left corner. White would have to add a stone to it to live in the corner, and then black would start attacking on the upper side. So this is a fairly active way for black to build kind of a little wall there in the center of the board while sacrificing 3 stones. So Shuho is perfectly okay with the idea of sacrificing these 3 stones because black has already established the territory on the right side. And that was sort of the main part, the main object of the whole attack here. So black's accomplished that mission. And the next part of black's attack was to solidify his group in the center of the board. So to make a strong group there. He's accomplished that too. And he's going to have Sente because white has to defend the lower left corner. So he's going to be able to invade at h17, which is an important invasion. So that was black's game plan. And Shuwa is going to try to change that just a little bit with this jump. So when white jumps here, if black pushes, now white's going to do that. And it's the same sequence, only black's next move towards white's lower left corner is going to be, it's less effective. So that's what this exchange here was sort of getting in the way of black effectively attacking white in the lower left corner. So that would be a significant difference. Just when comparing with, let's see if I can find it. Just when comparing with this variation. It's much less that black is getting towards the center. On the other hand, if black bumps, this would get rid of the cut here. I mean, well, yeah. Or I started with detachment, but you know what I'm talking about now. That would get rid of it. White would be able to sort of surround black. It's not a complete surrounding, but it's going to slow black's moving out in the center. White's going to get a bit of an advantage from this exchange here. This exchange is going to slow black down, and that's pretty significant too. So black wants to push through here, but he knows that he's going to have to sacrifice the 3 stones in this variation. So what he does is he's going to play this move first. So he's going to get all of the forcing moves in before sacrificing the 3 stones. For the time being, black doesn't have to... Like if white played here, black could probably even just play here and kill the whole group. But yeah, basically the idea is that even if white finds a timing to play that, then black will have more ease in moving out into the center. So it's a bit premature for white to attack that weakness now. White has to deal with the lower side. And black's going to play this forcing move, which is threatening to kill white next. So if white plays on the outside, black has a number of ways. But black could just play like this, and this white group is dead. So black is playing this forcing move, which increases the side of black's corner, having established that profit there, the local profit. And so this was the best black could do against white's group on the lower side. It had 2 eyes. And now black's going to give up those 3 stones. So he knows that Shuwa is looking at this move. And so he knew that in advance. And that's why he played this exchange. So the exchange there, which might seem just sort of normal, it sort of indicates that he's already read out what white is trying to do here. It shows how their reading is, they're agreeing with each other in their calculation. And so black plays here and builds this strong position in the center. And with this move, black is threatening white's right side. So the threat there on the right was there all the time, but it becomes important the moment the whole board position settles down like this, and we don't have any immediate threats on the lower side of the board. Suddenly the right side, it becomes significant again. So what's going to happen here, and this stone that black has just played is going to be a part of it. So white would like to be able to protect the upper side here. This is a really important move. The game plan of both players is sort of, in the game plan, being able to play here or for black being able to invade the upper side, it changes everything. So both players throughout this fight that we had on the lower side of the board, both players were thinking of that sort of peripherally, and it was a part of the idea that white wants to add to the upper side, and black wants to get sente so that black can invade the upper side. The problem with this move now is that black will be able to push through here, and this variation. If white doesn't want to sacrifice those 4 stones on the right side, white has to do this, maybe push through. In this variation, this is just really dangerous for white. For one thing, black is threatening to kill white by surrounding like this, and you can see how this stone is really coming into play here. So that's good for black. Or if white white has to extend in the center, but then black can play here. This is one step forward to connecting all black stones. So it makes black's stones in the center and on the right side there. It makes everything strong. And white has to save the right side. And so black gets, this is the continue against white's group, the attack against white's group in the center is going to continue here. If black had tried to save the 3 stones, oh yeah, let's do that then. There's various ways black could have done it. But the problem with that is that if black tries to save the 3 stones, for instance, actually, maybe if black's going to save them, it would be this way. The problem is that black's group on the lower side is not alive. And so maybe white's even going to, in that case, white might even try, yeah. Well, the black group is in trouble anyway. White might even do it this way. That might be a bit too dangerous. Let's just say white plays like this. You can see how this exchange, again, it's protecting, this exchange is protecting the 3 white stones here. It's connecting these stones up. And so there's some danger for black. And there's the fact that it's sort of difficult for black to capture those white stones in the center. It's sort of dangerous for black to try to save the 3 stones. So it's much simpler for black to just sacrifice them. And you set up that way. And this move is a double threat. So everything is working for black here. And it's a lot easier than trying to save them. And the fact that black has already accomplished what he set out to do. His idea was that he was going to solidify this territory here. And he's already accomplished that. He also wanted to strengthen the black group, this black group here. And he's accomplished that. And also he wanted to have sente to get to the upper side. So that's what he's doing with, if white plays here, black gets to, and this would be a very strong attack against white on the right, as I was showing in the variation. So white had to put a stone in here. And so black is keeping control of the game. And this idea of taking local losses and controlling the game is still a very important thing that AIs are really good at. So programs like Katago or Lila, of course AlphaGo is like that too, we're very good at giving local advantages to take sente. And they're, like, I was always amazed at the way that almost all the Joseki or Joseki-like moves that AlphaGo played ended with AlphaGo having sente, having the tempo. It's something really good at controlling the overall board position. Okay, so here white kicks in the corner. White's trying to make that corner territory. You can see Shuwa is being very consistent in his game plan. His strategy is to take territory while being attacked. He allows his opponent to attack him. He might seem to be playing fairly passively, but he's sort of aggressively taking territory at the same time. So that's what he's doing here. He doesn't really have an opportunity to attack that black stone at 817. For instance, if he plays here, black's probably going to, this is, the knight's move is kind of, it's the attacking shape, but it's also a weak connection to white's group on the upper side. So black would reinforce this black group here. And this is putting pressure on white in the corner. So white would end up adding a stone in the corner, maybe something like that. Oops. Maybe something like that. And when black plays here, black's going to be able to cut white. So it's not clear that white's going to have opportunities to attack black. I think it's probably more dangerous for white. Okay. Back to the game. So white simply takes territory. It's very consistent with his general game plan. He's trying to balance the territory and handle his weak groups. So black gets to play the attacking move. And white plays the attachment here. You might note that the latter favors black. But that's not a problem yet. Like if black does it this way, that's not a problem. Sorry. That was a misclick. The ladder working is not an issue for white. White's just going to go underneath. And that capture, black doesn't really have very much space to make use of that capture. So it's the value of that is limited. White still has room to poke out into the center with a move like this. So the center is going to be difficult for black to make into a big territory. White's connected. That territory on the upper side might be low down on the second line. At this stage of the game, where white is handling a weak group, this is more than enough for white. So black's not going to do that. And black actually bumps against. So this is a very strong attack where white would like to play here. But as I was saying, in this case, the fact that the ladder favors black is important. So if white plays this one and black gets the ladder, that would be painful. 2 stones, it's a big difference. You can see there's a difference in what white's getting back in return also. I did try this move. This is just not working. It's just not going to work. When black plays here, that's threatening the ladder again. White can save the ladder this way. Black's going to live on the side, and all of white's stones, they're in trouble. Like those stones on the upper side are in trouble. White has to worry about the 3 stones in the center too. It's just too much happening. Yes. Leonardo de Wagner, the old proverb is the ponnuki in the center of the board is 30 points, actually. But it's there's 2 things about that. It's not really a ponnuki. It's not really a ponnuki when you have this extra stone messing with the shape. So that's one thing. And it's also the ponnuki is 30 points. Usually it's when it's early in the game, it can be 30 or more points. So the proverb has the ponnuki equal to 30 points. It's just a kind of an estimation or a convenient number. And it's pretty true in the beginning of the game. It's the ponnuki is really valuable. Towards the end of the game, for instance, in this case where the center is getting relatively small, the open areas in the center are getting relatively small, the value of a ponnuki will be reduced by that. And the value of the ponnuki is that you've captured a stone using 4 stones, and you're getting a very strong shape. In effect, you've only used 3 moves to do that. Whereas in this case, you can see that's why the fact that black has this extra stone here is significant, because that's a wasted move to get a similar strength in the center. So it's basically a very efficient shape that is very valuable early in the game. In many cases, not so valuable at this point. Plus the fact that there's that wasted stone there. So let's see. Okay. So yeah, that was a different variation. Jumping around a bit here. So black bumped against. White doesn't really have the option of pushing through here. So white goes down. And black gets to connect. So that was okay for black. And so we come to this position where it looks like we're maybe heading... Oh, Chris, thank you. Thank you for the present. We're in a position where it looks like... It's important, Leonardo, yeah. It was a good question, and it was good that you made me say that, because a lot of people don't know about that extra stone making it... We don't call it a ponnuki after all, when you have that extra stone messing with the shape. So that's an important point that a lot of people didn't know, and thanks for the question. Okay, so here we have this position where it looks like maybe we're heading into an endgame, and it's not very clear what's going to happen towards the center of the board. All of the side territories, they seem to be fairly well established. But actually, at this point of the game, black's gonna have a multi-pronged attack, and he's looking at various weaknesses. And it's the way he goes about it is really interesting because he's going to start with a potential gain in points. So he's going to attack the strongest group first, which is this one. Among the groups that still have something for black to poke at, this is the strongest group of them all. So he's going to make an asking move against this group, where he's going to ask white. Actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. He's gonna pretty soon. He's gonna do an asking move against that group, asking whether white's gonna back up or play strongly. And when white reacts strongly, black is going to have an attack that is still. This group is pretty close to alive, but there are some possibilities there. And so Murase Shuho is going to be sort of exploring those possibilities in an interactive attack that also involves the upper left corner. And there's also this group in the center. And black's trying to find a way to get some extra value out of the weakness there also. So there's these three groups. Standing alone, none of them are going to die. None of them are going to die, but black's going to try to make a combination of attacks that attack all of these groups all at the same time. And he's trying to make some value out of them. So that's what that's kind of a style that Shuho had. He was very good at this kind of multi-pronged attack. So he starts with this move, which is limiting white's ability to move around the center. So if white plays something like this, white doesn't have any eyes there locally. It means that black could then play here, and white would not. So for instance, something like this, you can see white doesn't have two eyes. White can make one eye in the corner. White can make an eye here. White can make an eye here. White doesn't have any way to do both of those at the same time. So white doesn't have two eyes. So by limiting white's space in the center with this move, that's what black is doing. He's threatening to go after this white group. Maybe white could have done this, but it would have been very dangerous. So white plays here. You can see white's starting to make the eyes. And now black plays here. So this is the asking move I was talking about. Black is asking, are you going to back off and play here? In this case, we would have had a relatively, I guess I would call it a normal game. A normal endgame, that is. Where black would just play this forcing move. And this actually cuts off white's 3 stones in the center. And maybe black would do that. Black does have a move here, which is going to be forcing. White would probably answer it. See, maybe here. But white has to answer it locally. Otherwise, that white group would be in danger. And so there is some potential for black to make a territory there in the center of the board. Something like this might happen. Black's group on the side is alive, so black doesn't have any problem living after white plays like this. That's perfectly alive. Something like this would be a relatively peaceful endgame. On the face of it, what they did was peaceful also, but there's a lot of threats and hidden attacks there. But instead, white covered on this side, not allowing black to do that. And usually you see in a position like this, the shapes that you usually see, or maybe a cut here. Okay, let's do it with stones. So if black cuts here, white's going to answer like this. And locally, white's territory is bigger than it was before. So it's sort of questionable how much mileage black got out of that. Another shape that you would often see would be this one, which doesn't quite work when white plays here. It doesn't work as well as you might expect. So it's not quite working. This move is a move that I've never seen in any other game. Pulling back like this on the second line. It's a very unusual shape, which is working in this particular game. And then black plays here. And you might be getting a bit dizzy, black sort of jumping around all over the place. This is actually a direct threat against white's group on the upper side. So if white plays something like this, and black plays here, I sort of doubt that white's going to be able to live here. So for instance, one variation would be this one. where black can actually... those of you who do my Tetsuji problems, you've probably seen something similar to this once. If white plays here, that exchange is going to win the race to capture for black, because white has no way to fill a liberty now. So the moment black plays that move, white doesn't look like white has enough room to live on the right. If we look towards the center of the board, white escaping in this direction, you can just see a lot of black stones waiting for that. So it's not going to work. So I sort of doubt that. I sort of doubt that white would survive that. And if we look at, let's see, the other variation might be white covering on top. Well, either way, this is just not working for white. It's black can connect underneath. So white doesn't have any ice space at all. So this is very, very dangerous. I say it's very, very dangerous for white. Or maybe I should just say it's dead. So this was a forcing move. What is he doing with this forcing move? We're going to see. So white answered that. Black could have played some more local moves. Yeah, the Kosumi at the edge of the board. I think the Chinese players actually have a name for it. It's a mouse stealing, the rat stealing oil or something like that. I'm not confident in my translation of that, so I'll leave it. So black is trying to make a living shape in the corner. This would not do it. This would just die like this. It's already dead. So white would maybe play something towards the center. So black curls around. Yep. And if white plays something like this, then black... If white just plays like that, black would have enough room to live in the corner. This is actually a ko, but that's going to be good enough for black. So white jumps, obviously, and black pushes through. And this is already a double threat. It's already a double threat. If white answers in the center, black can play here. Looks like it's dead, but actually black can play here and here. And black has a way to connect up there. Black, it's interesting because this white stone is sort of coming into play. If black just does this, then white can block and play here. And this would be a failure for black. But black's not going to do it that way. Black's going to wedge here and play a ko on the first line. And black has plenty of ko threats. Like, I think even this one would be good enough. But this is probably bigger. And the fact that this is such an important ko that's going to kill the whole white group in the upper left, white cannot afford to answer any ko threat at all. So this would be finishing, well, white would have to finish the ko. And you can see this is pretty devastating to that white group in the center of the board. The lower left corner is one of my life and death problems. White has a way. If white can force with this move and this move, white's going to be able to make a living shape. That's a basic life and death. Look for it in my Tsumego collection. Okay, I jumped ahead of the game. Okay, yeah. Okay, so when black played here, white did not have time. White did not have time to protect the center, and instead white curled here, taking away black's potential eye space. Black pushes through and cuts. This is threatening c15, so white had to answer that. And already black has sort of established a squeeze that's going to come later. So black has established a squeeze. Now black returns. Now this is a strange move that I don't understand. Kadago didn't agree with it. I would never have played this move. It's really strange. In a position where black could have cut immediately. But it could be that he's already calculated a win with this move also. Maybe it's just being sort of extra careful. And I think the idea is that if white plays here, black can kill the white group in the corner. So white doesn't have eyes. If black plays like this, there's a gote, one eye. It takes a move to make an eye in the corner. It takes a move to make an eye here. So white can't do both of those at the same time. So that's probably the idea, and white answered here. and is looking at a counterattack with a peep on the second line, which is going to happen later in the game. Now black is returning to the upper right corner, and white really needs to answer here too. The idea with that is that if white plays, let's have white play, let's see, this one. This is a really big move towards the center of the board. But black has some forcing moves. How it turns out, it sort of depends, and I'm going to talk about that later. But when black plays here, for the purpose of this, I'm going to have white just answer submissively, like this, and black can play here. It simplifies it. In actual play, white might struggle a little bit more, but this is already bad for white. For the same reasons I was talking about earlier, if white plays here, basically if white plays this way, then black always has this move. So that's why that's not working. If white plays here, this is the fun variation. It's forced. Yeah, I'm going through this relatively quickly, but it was a forced sequence, which is going to be a ko to kill the whole white group. Just look at the whole board position. You'll see that white doesn't really have any ko threats. So yeah, so that would be good for black. Yeah, so white cannot really afford to let black do that. So basically, it's this would be the killing move. And white answered here. So at every point, it looks so peaceful the way they play it out. There's nothing bad happening really, but there's all these hidden threats that are not coming out. Oh, the mouse stealing all is a different. Maybe it was a special life and death kind of thing. None of the threats are actually appearing on the board because white is foreseeing everything and protecting with these moves that were basically forced. But in the meanwhile, black is controlling the flow of the game, and we're going to see fairly soon, we're going to see how it results in a huge black territory in the center of the board, which sort of appears suddenly. At this point, it still looks like white has ways to get in from this side or from this side. So that's the next step in black's attack, is when he's starting this squeezing, which is kind of another, in a way, it's another asking move. It's asking how white replies. If white answers submissively in the corner and allows black to squeeze like this, that's a lot of points that black, and a few extra points that black's getting towards the upper side. So black would simply take the center on a relatively small scale, and it doesn't matter that white can get in a little bit. The profit that white gets on this side is pretty much nullified by the profit that black is getting here. So that would be an even trade. It would be just a great way to squeeze white on the upper side. So that's what black is asking to do with this move. And white countered with the push here. With this, black has made this a forcing move. So there's a hidden threat here, which is going to be a ko. So if white would really, throughout this whole sequence, every move, every time, white really wants to play here, but white's not getting a chance to do it. It's just he has such a strong control of the game, in attacks that are not appearing in the game moves, but they're there for the players to see. It's something I find very beautiful and interesting about this game. So the attack that black has on the upper side is that he's going to play here, and this is going to be a one-step ko. It's going to be a ko in the corner, but black has ko threats all over the place. Like black has ko threats towards this group, threatening to kill the white group in the lower left. Black has some ko threats against this white group. Black has a ko threat here, which might develop into 2 or 3 ko threats, depending on how white answers it. Black has ko threats all over the place. White doesn't really have any good ko threats. So the ko is going to be favorable for black. So white answered that. And with this move, black is still threatening the same ko with an Atari here. So white answered. And finally, black captures in the center. So this finishes the whole sequence where black started. Black started with this peep here, attacking white in the lower left. Then black continued with this asking move in the upper left, where black was trying to reduce white's corner. White didn't allow that to happen, so then black's attack switched to the upper side with this move for one, and forcing white to add stones to this group, while black continued his kind of project in the rest of the board. And finally, at the latest stage of black's attack, he established this line of stones here, which created a border for the territory, which he finally creates with this move. So the actual profit that black is taking out of this attack came with the final move after black has done all of the bullying around, you might say, forcing white to answer all over the place. Not really taking any local profit, but forcing white to follow him around the board. Finally, black takes the profit with the final move of the attack. And now it's just an endgame. So this whole sequence here established a win. Black's about 10 points ahead on the board. So it's actually bigger. Marumu P, saying hello to me in Japanese. Konnichiwa, Marumu P. So it's really very beautiful the way he is setting up this attack. And how peaceful it seems if you don't follow all of those threats that he was doing. It's easy to miss all of those variations that he was threatening to do. None of them appeared on the board. So that's how it is when both players are free to use time towards the end of the game. It doesn't happen so much nowadays when the players are usually in overtime at this point of the game and they make mistakes. In the old days, they did have more time, and they probably played relatively quickly in early stages, but when they had to calculate that like this, they could take their time and think about their moves. So very few mistakes towards the end of the game in this era, which is what makes the game so beautiful and close to perfect towards the end of the game. So let's just take a look at the following moves. White does try to reduce the center a little bit with this. And now black is going to finish off with a ko. So black still has a huge advantage in ko threats. So black's going to play a ko here. And of course, the life or death of the white group here is it has to do with that. So white has to be careful. And black has enough ko threats. Black's just going to force white. It's interesting to see white playing this asking move here, which is going to, let's just look at the moves. It's going to set up this forcing move, which is threatening to push through. It's threatening to push through at this point. So black doesn't want to allow white to do that. And that was in combination with this move here. So white was setting this up, and there's a significance to this stone at d8. So when white has time, he's going to have something to do towards the center of the board. So if you, it's a little problem that people could do if you want. What does white have in the center of the board? So I'll set that up. So white finally had to live in the corner, and black played this move, defending the center. So is anyone going to tell me what's going to happen in the center if black plays like this and greedily tries to solidify the border there? Mountain Sky, hello, thank you. Thank you for coming. So there's a sequence on the left side of this. Let's just put in the first move. So there's a sequence starting with this move, and if black cuts, there's going to be trouble. I wonder if everyone sees it. Okay, seems a bit quiet. Maybe I'll just go ahead and show you the answer. if white cuts here. It's actually, if you get to the right variation, it's pretty obvious. You just need a couple more stones on the board, and you can see that white is threatening a net in the center. And if black answers that, white can cut here. So that would devastate black's territory. Right. White Atari at E11. That was right. Very good. So you got it, Leonardo. But not a ladder. I don't. It's usually not a ladder. When white tries to chase in a ladder like this, the problem is that this move is putting white's stones in Atari. So it's pretty difficult for white to set up that ladder. But it's a lot easier to make a net out of it. So this would be the net. So this would be a net, or this would actually be threatening black's group on the left. So white would be able to get these two stones. So that would be big too. And it would take a big chunk out of the center. So yeah, it's pretty obvious once you get to that point. Otherwise, you might be looking at moves like this, or some kind of a ladder in the center, which is a bit more difficult to function. Would have to do. You could try to manufacture something with moves in this general area, setting it up, but it would be a lot more difficult. So in the game, actually, black avoided that by playing here, and he's established a solid win. So the game continued like this. And here, if white cuts, well, white can't actually break into the center. If white plays here and here, black would cut here. Looks like this is going to be dead. So that doesn't work. And white cut on this side and connected. And at this point, white resigns. So black has this this territory in the center, which is close to 30 points. If we count the territory in this whole, with this borderline here, if we just count this part of the center, this was an area that, as we seem to be entering the end game, it wasn't clear whether black was going to get any territory there at all. And it's about 30 points now. So that area there, which was not black's territory, it appeared sort of magically in the process of doing all these attacks in various parts of the board. And you can see that the white territories, they haven't really expanded very much in the process. So like this white group was reduced to a 2Y shape. It's not big. This territory, it expanded by several points. So that's where white took some profit. This territory, it's sort of stayed about the same size. So it was just in the upper left corner there where white was getting some profit from black's attack. And throughout this game, you might notice that all of the attacks that Shuho played were giving white local profit. He didn't take any local profit, he was taking a positional profit. Very much like AIs do nowadays. And it's for the time of this game, it was a very modern approach to winning a game with black. Because usually black was trying to win with a territorial advantage. So the way he manufactured this territory of 30 points, which suddenly appeared at the end of the game. It was a very beautiful and typical of Shuwa way of finishing the game. And so the game has come to an end. Safari Atari is saying he bets the AI prediction jumps around a lot. Actually, it was pretty stably saying that the game was good for black. I think it was a very well played game by Shuho. Even if you study it with the computer. Some of the moves were not the suggested move, but he seemed to be fairly steadily staying in the lead. And Rory Mitchell is saying it's fascinating that game records like this from hundreds of years ago are still available. And it was the Edo era where they started taking records that are still with us today. And it was a lot of professional level play. I think a lot of facets of Shuho styles did become very popular at high levels. It's just that this kind of attack, all of the calculation has to be sort of perfect. That's Patrick asking why did it not catch on. That it's very difficult to make these attacks work. It takes a lot of accurate calculation because the threats have to be real and they have to work if your opponent doesn't follow you around, as Shuwa was forced to in this game. So seeing it actually work like this is a special thing for me. So that's it for the commentary. Thanks for everyone for staying to the end here. And support me in Patreon. There's a link. I think there's a link pinned to the top of the chat even. So there's a link. And just support me and sign up to my channel. Yeah, sign up to my YouTube channel for more videos. I put out a lot of videos all the time. And thanks for watching, and goodbye. So the stream is going to fairly soon, it's going to end.